if you actually secure an efficiency gain in your workflow, in your function, you actually get the time back and you can reinvest that as you see fit. Whether that's in improving the process, improving a different process, more automation elsewhere, improving quality elsewhere, or just taking some time off, then you can do that. And I think that's a very important thing for us to recognize, that the time saved doesn't automatically go back to us. We have to negotiate for that.
So welcome to the episode of the Hiring Excellence Podcast. We're in Budapest today at the recruiTECH CE event, and I'm taking some time out for a beer with my good friend Hung Lee. Hung, thanks for joining me.
Cheers to you, JC. Thank you very much.
Hung, so you're normally on the other side of the mic interviewing me, everybody else, everyone in the world. I'm not sure everyone knows your background or knows who you are, how you became the man behind Brainfood. Would you mind maybe just start at the start? Talk to me about your career, background, recruiting, how you ended up setting up Brainfood and what Brainfood is.
Yeah, fair enough, man. I mean, the origin story of Brainfood, there's actually two different origin stories. I don't even know which one's true anymore. So it may well be they're both true in a way. But I started off basically as a recruiter, so I still think of myself as a recruiter. It's 2000 to 2009. I was the agency side recruiting Web 1 type people. So eBay, PayPal, that early era. I was the guy recruiting web developers, or then called web producers and stuff like that. So very exciting times, similar to vibe to what it is now, you know, crazy new companies coming up. And I did that for agencies in London for about 9 years. Popped out, did a bit of training type of work, early social talent type stuff, I may add. Terrible at that, so thank God someone better took that on. And ended up doing in-house type recruitment for these like 0 to 50 type growth startups. So recently funded, 3 million quid, 5 million quid. I'd be the guy that converts that into...
That's probably when I met you. By 2010, I met you, I think 2011.
That's probably when we first connected. Yeah, because I was blogging away then. I ended up working for a few of these growth companies in London. I live in East London, so it was very natural for me to be in those places. And I did like, 2-3 years worth of that type of recruitment. Me and a founder needs to get to like core team setup, hire a replacement, I'm out and I'll do the next one. So did a lot of that. Ended up meeting a lot of engineers as a result, some of whom become friends in a weird way. And inevitably they come to you and say, Hung, let's go build something. And so we launched a tech platform in 2013. Which was a matching platform. So we were in the Hired.com era, if you remember Hired. We were a competitor of those businesses then. Company ultimately failed.
Was Brave New Talent, was it?
No, that was Workshape.
Oh, Workshape, sorry.
So Brave New Talent was the first in-house gig. And that's where I met my founders for Workshape. And Workshape basically was a talent matching platform based on what we thought the candidate sentiment was, what they wanted to do rather than what they had done. We'd visualize it and match it, and then hopefully make it easier for employers to connect with highly skilled in-demand talent. Great product, terrible CEO. So I was always going to crash this car, but my attempts to save it started what I'm doing now, which was, doing content, doing newsletters, basically trying to stuff top of funnel just by creating a bit more noise about about myself and breadcrumbing it back to the product. And in the end, that became more important to the audience, became more important to me, and Recruitment Brainfood was on its way.
So when was Brainfood started as a newsletter? When was the first time? What was episode 1 or edition 1?
We can actually map that back because I haven't missed a week, and we're up to issue 502, I believe 503 coming this Sunday. So it's more or less 10 years. 9.5, I think on October is 10 years. So yeah, it's 2016. Yeah, was when it started.
So the idea was more analog than what others were doing. And arguably that more analog method ended up having more longevity than what everyone else was doing at the time.
What do you mean analog, Johnny?
You set up an email newsletter. when everyone else was running away from email and saying it's to be all social, it's all about Facebook, it's all about YouTube pages and everything else, everyone else is gone and you're still alive and healthier than ever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, basically, I thought there was space for long form reading. You know, I felt there was space. We get loads of distractions. We're responding to notifications. But I think even back then, I felt there was a thirst for a space that we wanted to create where we're just going to read one thing. And that's why I thought, okay, I'm going to just do a text-based communication. I want to send it at a certain time of the week where I thought that space might exist. So it's sent on Sunday morning, which is maybe an unusual time to send a newsletter. But I thought, okay, when we were getting the paper out and reading that over a coffee on a Sunday, that was the analog. And I thought, maybe we do that via email newsletter these days.
Can you remember any of the items that were in the first ever episode? Or first ever letter?
Oh, I remember the first ever letter, and it was a disaster because I sent it. I was so incompetent at doing newsletters that I sent it to a grand total of one person. And that person was me. So I had no idea how to do the mechanics of it. Sent it to myself. I thought, right, that was the first quit point. I gotta be honest. I thought, what am I doing? I spent all this time putting together this newsletter, pushed it out with a huge expectation, and then lands on one person's inbox. It's actually my own inbox. I thought, right, I ain't doing that again. But then I remembered a conversation I had with Matt Alder, our friend Matt Alder. And he, of course, long-running podcast in the recruitment game. And I remember him me and him talking about sort of doing a content channel. And he said, yeah, just do it for a year before you even look at ROI. And I remembered that. And I thought, you know what, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I've made a commitment. I'm going to do this every week for 1 year, 52 issues. And only then am I going to look at the numbers and then work out whether it's worth it. And that was probably the best and most decisive decision I made on Brainfood, because if my window of analysis was 12 weeks, or if it was even 3 months, I would have stopped it.
Explain Brainfood to a recruiter who's never come across it, doesn't know what it is, never read it. Tell me what it is today.
Yep, it is a curated newsletter where I'm picking out 10 things that I think are very interesting for the recruitment industry that may have come from outside of the recruitment industry, come from non-mainstream sources. There's stuff that you wouldn't find on your own. I've picked them out and said, you know what, this has been really interesting for me to think about. Maybe this is something that can help stimulate you. Recruiters, I think, are very intelligent people, but they're often locked in a repetitive type of function. And I'm not sure we always get the chance to exercise our mental faculties to the fullest extent. And I wanted Recruiting Brainfood to be as literally that, to basically stimulate some neurological growth. Can we have some exciting things to think about, maybe even trigger you a little bit, just think about something a little bit differently, and give you that mental stimulation for your week ahead. So that's what Recruiting Brainfood still is.
It's expanded though. You've gone beyond just it's a wonderful, wonderful newsletter you hand created every week. You have podcast show, you speak a lot. So tell me what it's expanded to today, because people might be thinking, I know this guy, but I don't read the newsletter.
Yeah, I mean, basically I do a weekly webinar. I do a second newsletter on Monday, which is more like my own sort of a free-form essay, original writing. I participate in a lot of events where I recruitTECH CEE right now. I do that because I think it's all part of the job. And the job ultimately is to look at the ecosystem of recruitment and all of the characters in that, whether you're a recruiter, you're a hiring manager, you're a candidate, you're a tech provider, whatever you are. I think that ecosystem is better when it's healthy, when it's high energy, and where the information flows and it's high density. I think everyone benefits from that. And so whatever it is I'm doing is all geared towards that North Star.
I'd argue that over that 10 years, you've become to recruitment what maybe Lorne Michaels was to comedy in the US, in terms of maybe no one's ever heard Lorne Michaels tell a joke, but every comedian every movie has, you've uncovered them because of him. You're and I think you would deny this, but I'm going to say you're the most well-known and influential guy in recruitment, person in recruitment in the world. No one else has that much influence. And the influence, different to most people who have massive egos, right? I have a big ego. Other people have big egos. You do it through the power of sharing what other people are saying. That curation, that's an unbelievable skill.
It's very kind of you to say, and I would dispute some of the things you've said there.
I'm sure you would.
It's very kind. But yeah, I mean, I learn from other people so much, man. You know, I learn from you, I learn from Glenn, I learn from all these amazing people. And I'm under no illusions, you know, I don't pretend to be an expert because the reality is I'm not. I'm a person that is just curious. And the only thing that differentiates me from someone else, I think, is that I may know enough to know what's super interesting. And yeah, I'm there to present it. I'm not trying to endorse a particular view. I'm not trying to say this framework is better than that framework or that product is better than this. The truth is I don't know, but it may be, hey, this is interesting. It's worth paying attention to, folks. Check it out. And that's generally how I kind of control my activities. You know, it seems to land well with the audience. It lands well with me, and that it kind of enables me to continue doing it.
Tell me about how the sausage gets made. Like what goes into a week on brain food for you? Because folks might read it and go, oh, you know, my news feed gives me stories.
Yeah.
So what's all this about? Walk me through the process of getting to a Sunday morning.
Yeah. So probably the biggest revelation that most people might not understand about the content collection part is that I don't search for anything. So I'm not online searching for anything. I'm not asking ChatGPT what's interesting. The technique is to position yourself into where the information is flowing organically and then just picking stuff out. So again, using sort of straining more analogy, should we say, it's like being a fisherman choosing the point in the river to fish. Like the skill is choosing the point in the river. It's not necessarily casting the line at the longest length or whatever. It's figuring out where the fish are. And then just being patient and then picking out, okay, that's interesting, or that's a new take. Maybe that's a mistake, but it's still an interesting way in which that mistake's been made. That's worth talking about. And the education and the intelligence comes from the debate afterwards, I find. So it's there to stimulate conversation, there to stimulate more thinking, and then the education comes from everyone else who's contributing to that.
So you've become like the New York Times or the Times of London of the recruiting industry, right? I think whether you're a leader, whether you're an individual recruiter, folks know to go to you and the newsletter as a reliable and, as you say, independent source, which is phenomenal. You've seen, I imagine, tons of trends over 10 years. Tell me about how the AI trend compares to some of the other trends you've seen. When did it kind of start for you? How has it evolved? So maybe that might bring us to your talk today that you've delivered this morning.
Yeah, so I think actually AI is a milestone it kills a lot of trends pre-AI. So 2022, I think, was the decisive year, should we say, where the past stopped meaning what it did and the new future began for us. It wasn't just AI that arrived in 2022. Lots of other things, two other things I would say made a huge difference. Number one, basically the end of the zero interest rate period that we've been having for 15 years or so after the great financial crisis. So this goes back into a little bit of economic history. But after the GFC, basically what happened was the US Federal Reserve kept interest rates close to zero, which meant there was tons of cash invested into companies, typically tech companies, in order to scale up. This is the tech unicorn era. Now, why that's significant for recruiting is that a lot of the big conversations in recruiting was all about scaling tech teams. It was all about, hey, how do we go from 0 to 1,000 engineers in this period of time and maintain diversity, maintain quality, maintain culture? That was the dominant conversation for 15 years, really, in the tech space. But because tech was so dominant, it became the dominant discourse across recruitment.
Wasn't there a peak moment, Hong, when I think you put this on Brain Food, on the amount of jobs advertised for recruiters exceeded the amount of software engineer jobs?
It was May 2021. May 2021 was absolute peak recruiter. And this is just after, this is the period where really post-pandemic, post-lockdown, there was this feeling of, okay, the world's going to go even more digital than it was before. That means every process that is analog needs to be converted into digital. That means more tech hiring. That means more recruiters, and we couldn't hire the tech recruiters. And suddenly us recruiters were getting ridiculous offers, 200K base, take 6 weeks for the sabbatical every year whenever you want, work remote, no problem, everything, right? It was crazy times. Lasted for about 6 months. So our golden era, which should have been, I thought, a decade plus, lasted 6 months. Why did it sort of crush down? Well, that's when the interest rates started being cranked up. I think it was bad analysis by the US Fed Reserve. And without getting too political, I think basically the Fed Reserve wanted to time their interest rate rises and then do an interest rate cut in order to support President Biden's return effort against Trump. I think that's basically what happened. Backfired massively because it just raised costs for everyone and it pulled money out of the economy back into the banks, which means suddenly we weren't on that growth spurt. And the second thing that happened, again, apologies for bringing in geopolitics in this, but of course the Russia-Ukraine war kicked off in earnest in that same year. And the Western response to that really was a landmark to the end of a globalized system. Now, again, no one supports the Russian invasion of Ukraine. However, the response of the Western world in weaponizing a lot of the systems that were there, kicking Russia off SWIFT, freezing assets, doing all of those things, basically caused everyone else to think, you know what, we can't trust these so-called neutral institutions because it basically we might lose our cash, we might lose our investment. We have to go a parallel route. So from that, we have what I call hostile deglobalization. And globalization, the past 30 years, have been the reason why we had this economic growth globally. So those factors basically reduced economic growth. Less economic growth is less hiring. Suddenly we look at recruitment differently. And then out of nowhere, AI lands on our plate. Suddenly CEOs are looking at that and saying, hey, maybe we don't need to recruit that many people. So 2022 is essentially the end of peak recruiter in terms of TA. And it's opening up a totally new world. When you talk about how that compares to trends, AI is part of that moment which ended that period from 2008 to 2022.
This morning on the stage, you introduced 3 characters, let's call them, to the audience. Explain those characters and their perspective on AI.
Yeah, well, I wrote an article about sort of people who talk about AI. It was very interesting because, everyone's confused and we have a situation where we have very intelligent people making very cogent arguments that seem to contradict each other. And for the layperson on the street like me, and probably a lot of people listening to this podcast, is like, okay, how do we know which advice to take? And I thought it was a useful exercise just to consider, to create some archetypes as to who talks about what. So AI optimist, this is typically a technologist, or typically a venture capitalist for technologists. And they're talking about a future where, yes, artificial intelligence is going to be disruptive, but the medium to long-term outcome is a net gain on jobs because it's going to create massive economic growth because productivity will increase. So the disruptions we're feeling today, painful but temporary, and then we're going to have a big boost up. And they're leaning on their previous reads on previous technology revolutions as evidence of this. Then we have the AI pessimists, which kind of don't disagree with the fundamental analysis that it's disruptive. They just don't think the disruption is worth the pain, or the pain has been particularly well calculated into that assessment. In other words, what happens if millions of people are thrown out of work? Do we know what happens socially if that occurs? Do we know what happens politically if that occurs? And they again point to historical examples where technology revolutions, the same ones that the optimists talk about in positive terms, they say, you know what, industrialization produced communism, it produced Nazism, it produced global conflict. Do you know how many people died as a result of all of that? So that's the pessimistic view. And then you have the AI skeptic view, which is basically revolutions matter, but this one, it matters less than we think, and it will happen more slowly. So it's not going to be just like a black and white shift overnight, a flick of a switch, but we'll just notice suddenly robots are doing everything for us, or suddenly all of the information we're dealing with is actually mediated by an AI agent that we are controlling.
Of information. On that, you spent the second half of the presentation not arguing for or against any one of those three modes. Again, as you say, you swim between them. You walked us through what can we do regardless of which view you have. I thought there was some amazingly interesting observations and suggestions there. Can you pick out a handful that you feel are probably the most important to share?
Yeah, so I think I think we've moved beyond the point where we've got a choice about AI. Like AI is being rolled into us whether we like it or not. And so that takes off the table one of the choices that was in existence 18 months or so ago, where people would say, yeah, I'm not dealing with it. Can't not deal with it, you're dealing with it. So we have to lean into it as a profession, but we also need to understand whether it's good or bad for us immediately depends on whether we're running our own business or not. There's no coincidence that the people who evangelize most about AI are typically people that have ownership stake of the business. CEOs, the investors. If you're an entrepreneur, you love AI because suddenly your capability of operating a business is massively expanded. However, your relationship with AI is different if you're an employee of that business, because what does that scope expansion mean for you? It means that you're busier than ever. It means that your expectations in terms of how you judge on performance have elevated. Are you getting paid anymore as a result of that? Answer is no. And so all of AI presents to you is kind of an attempt to stay relevant, but it's a negative motivation. It's like, I'm using AI because if I don't, I might get fired. That is ultimately not a long-term motivation that's sustainable. We need to flip that such that you're using AI to get better at your job, to improve your conditions, but also so that you can grab hold of the value that you've created for the business. And this is what I mean by the keep what you kill policy, which is not my invention, by the way, not even my popularization. Aaron Levy, CEO of Box, kind of articulated that. And he basically did that only because he recognized that AI adoption in his business was slower than he'd like. And he figured out it's because the employees were frightened of AI, or they were frightened of what it meant that AI was here. And so he flipped it on its head and said, look, if you actually secure an efficiency gain in your workflow, in your function, you actually get the time back and you can reinvest that as you see fit. Whether that's in improving the process, improving a different process, more automation elsewhere, improving quality elsewhere, or just taking some time off, then you can do that. And I think that's a very important thing for us to recognize, that the time saved doesn't automatically go back to us. We have to negotiate for that. And I think it's a great way where we secure something close to a win-win-win outcome for everybody, employer, employee, and at the end of the day, the customer of the business that's being served. They should get a better product, better service, maybe at a cheaper price.
You talked about how there's a risk with AI that the token costs today are being heavily subsidized by VCs. I read recently about a UK food company that a private equity firm bought into. And this company was offering organic chickens, I think was an example, for £3 a chicken for a period of years. And they were selling loads of them. The thing is, it cost them £6 to put that chicken on the shelf. And eventually that business folded because you can't keep throwing money into it. And in fact, it wasn't a £3 chicken, it was a £3 chicken subsidized by a PE who spent £3 on the chicken for every time you bought it.
Correct.
That's kind of what's happening with tokens today, as we're learning that the tokens are being subsidized. They're not making money for the LLM. They're not, the PEs are throwing money into building data centers that aren't funding this, aren't getting a return from this, I should say. I guess the industry probably thinks it's the Amazon example. Everyone looks at Amazon going, don't worry, 20 years of losing money, you'll make so much money at the end, it's all worth it. What's the risk of wide scale LLM adoption and how it relates to token costs that you called out this morning?
Yeah, I think anybody who's been like at the advanced edge of AI adoption probably has already personally and directly experienced this, where you've ripped out a non-AI process, you've created an AI native process that was dependent on this token budget that you had, but the token budget either gets sort of burns through faster than you realize, or it gets more expensive because you're not in control of how much it costs. And we've seen recently, I think the last couple of weeks, we've seen Anthropic increase sort of the cost of their subscription packages at the same time as throttling usage elsewhere. And I guess the main concern from a TA and HR perspective is if we're replacing payroll with all of this automated and AI SaaS solutions, are we actually rewiring our business such that we've lost control of our business? Because it suddenly is a sort of Anthropic deciding whether we can run that business or not by escalating their token costs to us. So there's a huge risk there. I think we're starting to be aware of it belatedly. But it's a bigger story than I think this is going to be one of the dominant stories of the next 6 months at least, particularly when you've got competition with open source models that are far, far cheaper. And obviously most of these open source models are coming out of China, and that creates basically a geopolitical dimension to this, which is very difficult for a lot of Western people to adopt.
So you're saying it's maybe like the lock-in model of the razor blade industry, where you buy a razor below cost, and you're locked into using their blades, which where they make the margin, whereas you get sucked in by replacing your process with an LLM, and you're locked into the token costs that you can't unbundle, and you've moved away from humans or an alternative, and you can't get out of that for years or get out of that forever.
Yeah, it's no different really from, I say it's no different, it is similar, but there's analogies to when the internet was first rolled out. I think you and I are both old enough to remember where you needed a CD to get on the internet, and you used to pay like AOL £2.99 for this CD, and it was like totally worth it because, you know, this is what it is. And then basically what happened with that business model was that they realized that actually it's better to just give it away free to get access and then build the value further down the chain. So all of the businesses, none of the telecoms providers reap the benefit from the internet in the same way as the other companies that built on top of it. So the big winners of that internet period are the Googles, the Facebooks, and the Amazons of this world, all that e-commerce stack. They're the ones that harvested the value. Now where we're at with AI right now is that we're still the people who are distributing the models are basically like the old telecoms providers. They're the ones that are trying to make the money by metering our access to intelligence. And that's unfortunately now developed a lot of geopolitical kind of narrative to say you have to do it this way. But another way of looking at it is, you know what, open source intelligence is going to distribute capability across the entire planet. And maybe that's a similar to distributing internet across the entire planet, and the value will just move later on down the stack, the applications that are built on top of that technology. I think that's a better world than having the intelligence metered at the gate.
I guess to expand the analogy, right? We used to have amazingly expensive long distance telephone charges, and then someone used VoIP, and VoIP killed all that because it was like, you know, it's good enough, pretty close, and we can make it near free over the internet, and because that channel was cheaper. I've talked to recruiting leaders who give me the examples of, you know, these AI screening or interviewing tools that are becoming more widely available. Average around or started around $4, €4, £4 per interview. And they'll say, you know what, we can hire recruiters in Southeast Asia or in South America for less than that per hour. And there's no EU AI Act or California Act to worry about. There's no worry about the AI going rogue. It's an employee who's very skilled, very competent, and we're creating, you know, ethically jobs for people doing this way rather than putting it into, you know, a rich billionaire's pocket. That is a real thing, right? In terms of the AI may be able to do things that a human could do or even do them better. But at the end of the day, in the same way that robotics hasn't yet fully taken off in all sorts of manufacturing, is that as long as labor is cheaper than robotics, labor will win. Are we saying that's probably going to be the case here, as long as the subsidy is removed?
It's an emerging outcome that, again, I think a lot of people will find unwelcome because it accelerates this offshoring of jobs that probably most countries that are kind of exporting those jobs don't want. If you, for instance, had a bunch of software engineers in London and you decided that you need less software engineers because AI is going to do all of this, you fire half the team, then you find out that the AI costs are far more than actually the human beings that you'd fired, you're going to rehire those software engineers, but will you rehire them in London, in the most expensive place? Or are you going to say, hey, I know these people in Cape Town, or I know these people in Budapest, they're just as good, if not better, and you pay them far less. So there may be a global redistribution of essentially white collar work and kind of offshoring 2.0 coming back as a result of AI being mistakenly accounted for, if the subsidy argument is correct.
Well, I'd argue it's 3.0. Post-pandemic, a lot of roles that we thought couldn't be offshored, for example, audit. Auditors had to come on site. And then we couldn't go on site for 2 years. And then the accounting firms realized we don't need to go back. We did just fine. And our clients now got used to the auditors being remote and analyzing our data remotely. So therefore, let's not put them on site. They're not on site. Let's not hire them in Europe or the US. So we did that already with a lot of jobs in 2022. When we rehired them somewhere else. Now we are, again, to your point, at risk of a third wave of that, where we realize the AI isn't quite as good or isn't cheap enough, or the price goes up to a point where we do it. Do you think there's a risk? Because we've talked a lot about, me and you and others, about recruiting teams are trying to build their own tools at the moment, which is phenomenal, right? I love the innovation there. But a recruiter building a tool is going to use the highest end model available. And when it comes to cost, an application provider is going to build it in a way that's smart, using the right model at the right price for the right application in a process. You know, do you think that there's a moat to be created by companies who are clever about the costing of AI and the proper use of the right model for the right job that genuinely can deliver AI, but at the right price point that justifies itself?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the vibe coding movement, I think, is something I massively endorse. It's very exciting. It's a democratization. I don't like to use the term, but it's a dissemination of capability outside of the tech industry and into the hands of others. I think that's broadly positive. However, there's complications associated with that, particularly when you're working for a company. Different when you're working for yourself. You know, you're putting your own business at risk. You're putting your own stuff at risk. But when you're sort of using vibe coded tools in a corporate context, you're actually accessing processing data that you personally don't own. And it's owned, and the custodian for that information is actually the business. And there's a big question mark there is, okay, how do you actually police that? How do you make that compliant? No different from bring your own tech into a bank. Typically, you can't do that. You can't just, bring your own computer in and start logging into banking systems, even though it's more convenient and efficient for you. Why? Because there's all kind of data leakage issues, all kind of IP issues, all kind of cybersecurity issues. I think vibe coding kind of opens up a whole new sort of surface area for those risks. So I'm pro vibe coding, even though I'm ultimately, I don't see it having a huge positive impact in the corporate setting, because I think you're going to just breach too many compliance rules, and the companies are going to end up becoming quite totalitarian with regards to their employees' use of it. You're going to start seeing contracts written in terms saying, look, if you're using AI into the business that you've not been given direction or license to use, you're going to be personally liable for all of this stuff. So those clauses will start being inserted into employee contracts, and basically, I think that will knock the vibe coding in corporate out. I think solopreneur, that's going to fly in that space because the risk and the risk appetite is different.
As a solopreneur, Hung, talk to me about what impact AI has had on your job, your role. Do you see opportunity to further use AI in what you do?
100%. I put my hands up very early to say I'm a laggard when it comes to AI adoption myself. And that's not because I don't think I'm technical enough or I don't have the interest. This is purely because of a bandwidth issue. And the lowest hanging fruit for AI is still generative AI. So in other words, generating content, generating images or whatever it is. And that is actually the part of AI which I'm most reluctant to use for what I do. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine in Budapest, actually. And he said, Hung, listen, give me a weekend. I'll be able to come up with something that's going to really help you out. It's going to do this, this, and this, 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 and this. And in the end, he was absolutely right. But all of his recommendations was talking about the production of the content. And I can't allow for that to happen because it has to be my authentic and unadulterated voice. So I have to type this stuff out. I have to read the content in order to commentate on it. I have to consume in order to be able to commentate on it. So there's a chunk of work which I can't automate. Now, what I can automate is all of the back office stuff. I'm terrible at the CRM aspect of dealing with subscribers. I could be much better at that. And maybe I could use AI to try and like create different versions of the content in different format. Absolutely. Could I do better on the business side, the sponsor side of AI? Absolutely. So lots of things that could improve. But right now, its impact for me is not particularly high.
What's next for Brainfood? As we look into the next decade, hopefully, or even more, what can we expect from Brainfood?
I don't know, man. I mean, people rightly kind of expect a strategy from me or some sort of foresight. The truth is that I don't have any foresight or strategy. The policy of Brainfood generally has just been to lean in to where the information or the stuff seems to be happening, and then just work it out from there. It's not like saying, here's the destination, I'm going to shoot for that destination, that's where it's going to be. It's more like there's a big forest in front of me, there's no path through the forest, I'm just going to try and feel my way through. Do you know what I mean? Which is the best route? I don't know. I'm on the journey of exploration. So the journey of exploration with Brainfood is going to continue. Hopefully that's going to be interesting enough to bring everyone along with me. But yeah, there's no like, oh, here's the destination, I'm done. I don't see that as an outcome for us.
As our beer nearly ends, Hung, final question for you, because anyone listening or watching who follows you on Instagram knows you travel the world a lot. You get to see different cultures, different parts of the world. Tell me about your favorite cities to go to, favorite cultures you've been to, maybe top food tips.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd hate to pick out some amazing things because every city and every culture has interesting stories to tell. And even if the experience is challenging, sometimes they're the richest experiences, you know? You can't just get the free sugar hit and think that's amazing. Sometimes you need a bit of bitterness to actually get what's going on. So I'll give you a few food tips though straight away. Unusual ones, there's a bakery in Japan, in a town called Fukuoka. It's called Pain Stock, or I think it's Pain Stock, so it's French. But they have the most incredible selection of super interesting flavored breads that you'd never get. One thing the Asians get right is being very creative with the
So give me an example of a creative flavor for bread.
So they'll say things like salted egg yolk with caramel in this brioche, or something like that. Or it'll be something called pork floss on a croissant. Like, what is that? I don't know. But it's this mix of salt and sweet that you typically don't get in Western Europe.
Japanese bakery done. What else?
Absolutely amazing. I went to Busan in Korea. In an amazing fish market there. I forget the name. I think it's called, is it Chamoji or something like this? It's a huge fish market, old school, literally have all kinds of denizens of the deep being sold in buckets and tanks everywhere. And I had some raw crab in this market.
Like sushi kind of thing?
It's just raw, but marinated in a sauce. And yeah, you shouldn't cook crab, man. You should eat it raw. It's fucking the business. Sorry, it's the business. And the final food thing, I'm going to suggest an ice cream in Shanghai by a brand which is unhelpfully called Gelato. So it's a Chinese brand called Gelato. You try and search for gelato online. Obviously, it's like festooned by information. But if you're ever in China, look for a brand called Gelato. And their signature thing is they're going to stack a cone like 6 inches high, like massive cone. But they've got some wonderful flavors. And the flavor that I just literally fell in love with was rice-flavored ice cream.
Rice-flavored ice cream?
Rice cream.
How stereotypical. Rice cream.
Rice. Mate, I looked at that and I thought, man, are they taking the mick? Like, are they just literally playing up to a stereotype? I've got to buy this. But I bought it and it's like rice pudding. Yeah?
Nice.
So soft bits of rice grain in this towering cone. Best ice cream ever. The best.
I will take those recommendations. Hung, it's been a pleasure. Lovely to hear. As a motorbike goes past, lovely to hear your story, what you're doing. Can't wait for the next 10 years, and congrats on the first 10 years of Brainfood.
Brilliant.
Oh no, cheers on that.
Cheers to you. Great chatting to you, man.
And thank you for listening and joining us for this special edition in Budapest. We'll be back next week with a great leader in talent. Until then, take care. you.